I've always loved the sound of snow falling. It reminds me of watching lightning crack across the sky or catching a glimpse of a shooting star. Rare, fleeting moments you can't control. They don't happen often, but when they do, they feel like a small gift. I'm not much of a hiker, honestly, but when snow starts coming down, something in me switches. We all have those urges we can't quite explain. This story took place on one of those snowy nights. I live in a pretty wooded area, not deep in the forest exactly, but close enough. If I really wanted to disappear into dense woods, it would only take a short drive. I didn't have anything important going on the next day, so it must have been a weekend. Most likely a Saturday, since I remember feeling mildly hungover from the night before. What made it stranger was that snow wasn't even in the forecast. I know that for sure because I constantly check the weather during winter. I was in my room reading, just started. No buildup, no warning. It was like someone flipped a switch. I didn't notice right away, but when I finally looked outside, the ground was already coated. Without really thinking it through, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to take a walk in it, a snow walk, so I did. I drove out to a quiet spot, a local hiking trail that doesn't get much attention. It's usually empty, especially at night. I stepped out of the car, stood there for a moment watching the snow fall, and then started walking. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to go farther in, deeper into the trees where the snow felt untouched. After about 20 minutes, I felt like I'd gone far enough. I stopped to take it all in, and that's when it happened. The exact moment I paused, I heard something. Something that absolutely did not belong there. It was the sound of a child's voice. It took a few seconds for my brain to even register what I just heard. I told myself I was imagining it, just my mind filling in the silence. But then it happened again. A small voice, clear as day, calling out, "Hi." On paper, that doesn't sound threatening at all. But in that moment, it was terrifying. It was the absolute last thing I expected to hear out there, alone in the woods in the middle of a snowstorm. What made it worse was that I couldn't figure out where the sound was coming from. It didn't seem to have a single direction. It felt like it came from everywhere at once. I spun around, scanning the trees, but there was no one there. I kept turning, heart racing, but the woods were empty. I decided I'd had enough and started to head back toward my car. That's when the voice spoke again. There was no mistaking it now. It was a young boy. This time he said, "Up here, silly." Before I could even stop myself or think about how disturbing that was, I looked up. That's when I saw him. A small boy, maybe 9-year-old, was sitting casually on a tree branch not far from me. The sight of it was unreal. He was dressed for the cold, bundled up in winter clothes, but I couldn't understand how he'd gotten up there. The lowest branch had to be at least 20 feet above the ground. Oddly enough, actually seeing him eased my nerves a little. It felt like the fear had been coming more from the unknown than from the boy himself. I walked closer to the tree, never taking my eyes off him. He was grinning, an unnaturally wide smile, the kind that looks like someone who hasn't quite learned how to smile properly yet. But that sense of calm didn't last long. The more I paid attention to my surroundings, the more uneasy I became. There weren't any footprints in the snow beneath the tree, not a single one. That meant he'd climbed it before the snow started falling, which meant he'd been sitting up there for at least 45 minutes. And that doesn't even begin to explain how he managed to climb it at all. Like I mentioned before, climbing that tree would have been extremely difficult, even for someone with experience. The trunk was completely straight. He would have had to inch his way up at least 20 feet without any real handholds. He waved at me. I immediately asked how he'd managed to get up there. He said it was a secret, then went right back to wearing that horrible smile. I froze. The kid clearly shouldn't have been out there, and I felt like I had to do something, but I had no idea what. Was I supposed to try climbing the tree myself? Call out to him? Call the police? Before I could figure out what to say, he stood up on the branch and looked down at me. "Watch this," he said. Then he leaned backward and fell. There was no hesitation, no slip. He just dropped. He fell at least 30 feet. I screamed pure instinct. I could only watch as he slammed onto his back with a sickening thud. My stomach dropped. There was no way snow alone could have broken that fall. I was certain he was dead. I ran toward him, but before I could even reach where he'd landed, he jumped to his feet and took off running. It didn't make sense. A fall like that should have killed him. I screamed again, this time in disbelief, and stood there watching as he disappeared deeper into the trees. Even with the snow reflecting light, the woods were dark enough that he vanished almost instantly. I don't know what came over me next. Instead of doing the sensible thing and turning back, I chased after him. I can't explain it. I know myself. 9 times out of 10, I would have walked away. But this was that one time I didn't. That's the only explanation I have. I forced myself to calm down and followed the trail of his footprints. I knew he couldn't be far. After a few seconds of running, I heard laughter, not just laughing, cackling. It sent chills through me. It sounded playful, like he was enjoying himself, like this was all some kind of game. Meanwhile, I was terrified. His footprints curved around a nearby tree. As I ran past it, something suddenly grabbed onto my back. Before I could even react, I was yanked off my feet and slammed into the ground. The kid was on top of me, digging into my neck and shoulders with his hands. I screamed and grabbed at him blindly, trying to pull him off, but he wouldn't let go. He started screaming too, this high-pitched wail, and I could feel warm blood running down my skin. His fingernails were tearing into my neck, and for a moment I honestly thought he was going to claw my eyes out. Somehow I managed to get back onto my feet. Using everything I had, I threw him over my shoulder. He slammed into the ground, popped right back up, and took off into the woods again, still laughing as he ran. That time I didn't follow him. If it hadn't been for the cuts on my neck and the blood covering my hands, I might have just stood there frozen. The wounds didn't feel deep, but there was far more blood than I was comfortable seeing. I hadn't brought a scarf, so I yanked off my hat and wrapped it tightly around my neck. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, slick with blood, and I was in full panic mode. The next 20 minutes are hazy. I assume the fear and blood loss had something to do with that. The next clear memory I have is lying in the back of an ambulance. After that, I remember answering questions from police officers. I was treated for my injuries and asked to retell what happened again and again. At the time, I didn't understand why they seemed so skeptical. I only learned later that while I was in the hospital, the police searched the area and came up empty-handed. Even worse, they said they followed the footprints in the snow and found only one set, mine. Finding that out completely shattered me. At first, I was angry. I convinced myself they hadn't searched thoroughly enough. But then I started wondering, why would they lie? By the time I was released from the hospital and finished talking to the police, I barely had the energy to do anything except sleep. I can't remember if it was the next day or the one after. Like I said, things were still blurred. Eventually, I went back to the trail. It had snowed heavily since then, so it wasn't surprising that my original footprints were gone. I searched the forest anyway. It took hours, but I found nothing. No signs, no tracks, no indication that anyone else had ever been there. To this day, it's one of the most disturbing things that's ever happened to me or anyone I personally know.